On September 2, 2013, at the International Defense Industry Exhibition in Kielce, Poland, something occurred that literally left military experts from all over the world speechless. A vehicle slowly rolled out onto the exhibition grounds, looking as though it had been stolen from a film about the distant future. It featured angular hull edges, a predatory turret silhouette, and a completely enclosed geometry without a single protruding element. It resembled no other existing tank in the world. The Polish company OBRUM from the city of Kielce presented a concept to the public under the name PL-01. In the opening minutes, it seemed that little Poland had just revolutionized global tank manufacturing. News agencies caught on to the sensation instantly. Headlines were filled with words about a stealth tank, a fifth-generation vehicle, and a Polish answer to the Russian Armata and the American Abrams. Military bloggers recorded enthusiastic reviews, forums buzzed with discussions, and ordinary Poles swelled with pride. Their country, which for decades had been perceived as a consumer of foreign military equipment, suddenly declared itself the creator of something fundamentally new. Journalists competed to quote company representatives who confidently spoke about the revolutionary technologies embedded in this vehicle. According to them, the PL-01 was meant to become not just a tank, but a new type of combat vehicle capable of changing the rules of the game on the battlefield. It must be admitted that the stated characteristics were indeed impressive. The developers positioned their vehicle as a universal armored infantry support vehicle with the firepower of a full-fledged main combat tank. The main trump card was called active thermal camouflage technology, thanks to which the vehicle could allegedly become completely invisible to enemy thermal imagers. The very designation of the concept included the word stealth, which translates to invisible and invincible. These two words instantly became the main marketing hooks that caught not only ordinary citizens, but also serious military analysts. The British Defence Corporation BAE Systems, acting as a partner in the project, only added fuel to the fire. The participation of such a military industry giant lent solidity to the venture and forced people to take the Polish tank seriously. After all, if the British invested their competence and reputation into this matter, it meant that something real must stand behind the beautiful picture. That was precisely how most observers reasoned. The exhibition in Kielce lasted several days, and during this entire time, the pavilion with the Polish wonder vehicle was never empty for a single minute. Delegations from various countries lined up to examine the vehicle closely, ask the engineers questions, and receive promotional brochures with characteristics. The organizers of the display skillfully structured the presentation using dimmed lighting, dramatic illumination of the hull edges, and large screens with computer graphics demonstrating the tank in battle. In the video clips, the PL-01 dashed across rough terrain, destroyed targets, and disappeared from enemy sights like a ghost. The spectacle made a powerful impression, but amid the general enthusiasm, there were those who asked uncomfortable questions. Why was it impossible to look inside the vehicle? Why did the turret not move? Why was there not a single live shot, nor a single demonstration at a firing range? OBRUM representatives answered evasively that what was on display was a concept. A working prototype would be ready by 2016, and serial production would begin by 2022. Back then, these deadlines did not seem unbelievable because years of intense work often pass between a concept and serial production. There were few skeptics, and their voices drowned in a chorus of enthusiastic reviews. Global military publications dedicated entire double-page spreads to the Polish vehicle. It was compared with the best examples of armored vehicles on the planet, with the Israeli Merkava of the fourth generation, with the German Leopard 2A7, and with the South Korean Black Panther. In many theoretical analyses, the PL-01 looked more than decent, and in some aspects, it even surpassed competitors on paper. No one back then wanted to reflect on the fact that paper is just paper, and a real tank is separated from a beautiful brochure by a chasm costing billions of dollars and decades of design experience, which Poland simply lacked. It is from this very moment that the true story of the PL-01 begins. It is a story of grandiose promises, beautiful renders, and a harsh collision between dream and reality. To understand why this project was doomed from the very start, it is necessary to examine exactly what the Poles promised the world and how feasible those promises were. So, what exactly did the Poles put into their futuristic project, and why did the characteristics look so bold on paper? Let us begin with the main element: firepower. The primary armament of the PL-01 was to be a 120mm smoothbore gun of the NATO standard, with the option of installing an alternative weapon with a caliber of 105mm. The guidance angles allowed the barrel to lower by 10 degrees and raise by 20 degrees, providing good flexibility when firing at both ground and elevated targets. The most interesting part was not even the weapon itself, but the automatic loading system fed from a 16-round magazine located in the rear of the turret. This layout theoretically allowed a rate of fire exceeding 6 rounds per minute, while the total ammunition capacity of the vehicle was 45 shells, with the remaining 29 stored in the hull. In addition to the main weapon, the designers provided a coaxial machine gun of Ukrainian-Polish manufacture with a caliber of 7.62mm and an ammunition supply of 1,000 rounds. On the roof of the turret, a remotely controlled weapon station was planned with a heavy machine gun of 12.7mm caliber and a stock of 750 rounds. Instead of a machine gun, an automatic grenade launcher with a caliber of 40mm and an ammunition capacity of 400 grenades could be installed there. On paper, it turned out to be a true multi-purpose combatant, capable of engaging armored vehicles, infantry, and light fortifications. Firepower was only half of the equation. The true intrigue was created by the crew layout. The developers from OBRUM followed a path that, at that time, had only been implemented in serial production by Russia in the T-14 Armata project. The turret of the PL-01 was completely unmanned, and the entire crew of 3 people, consisting of the commander, gunner, and driver mechanic, was accommodated in an isolated armored capsule inside the hull. This solution radically increased human survivability because even if the turret was penetrated, the crew remained safe. The commander received a panoramic sighting system with day and night channels, as well as a third-generation thermal imager. All information was displayed on multifunctional screens inside the capsule, turning the tank into something resembling a fighter jet cockpit. To protect the vehicle, the Poles declared a modular composite armor combining ballistic ceramics and ordomit, a particularly strong grade of steel. There were even rumors about the possible use of titanium alloys, though confirmation of this never appeared. Some English-language sources mentioned depleted uranium within the armor packages, but this information looked more like a rumor than a real fact. The modular design of the armor allowed for rapid replacement of damaged sections in field conditions and permitted an increase in protection levels depending on the theater of military operations. Additionally, the installation of mine protection modules was envisioned, and the crew seats were equipped with a system to absorb shock waves from explosions. An active protection system, operating on a principle similar to the Israeli Iron Fist complex, formed a separate entry. 4 flat radar antennas combined with laser warning sensors were meant to detect incoming shells and missiles and then destroy them before impact. Launchers for smoke grenades were located on the sides of the turret to deploy smoke screens. Furthermore, the vehicle was equipped with an identification friend or foe system and an automatic target detection and tracking complex. With all this magnificence, the PL-01 remained surprisingly compact. The hull length was about 7 meters, the width was just under 4 meters, and the combat weight with additional armor did not exceed 35 tons. For comparison, the American Abrams weighs close to 63 tons, the German Leopard 2 weighs around 64 tons, and the Israeli Merkava of the fourth generation pulls 65 tons. The Polish vehicle turned out to be nearly twice as light as any of these giants, while claiming comparable firepower and protection. A diesel engine with a capacity of 950 horsepower would accelerate this 35-ton apparatus to 70 kilometers per hour on highways. Special pipes for air intake allowed the crossing of water obstacles up to 5 meters deep. This was precisely where questions began to mount for those who understood armored vehicles through channels other than advertising brochures. 35 tons is the mass of a light tank or a heavy infantry fighting vehicle. Squeezing a 120mm gun, serious composite armor, active protection, and an unmanned turret into such a weight, while ensuring mobility on par with the best vehicles in the world, is a task bordering on science fiction. Even the most advanced design schools on the planet failed to solve this puzzle. Yet Poland, which lacked experience in creating main combat tanks from scratch, claimed it would manage within a few short years. The main highlight of the entire project, the very trump card for which the PL-01 received its resounding nickname of stealth tank, was active thermal camouflage technology. The idea itself sounded almost fantastical. Special panels on the surface of the hull and turret were supposed to read the ambient temperature in real time and automatically adjust the vehicle's own thermal radiation to match the background of the terrain. Simply put, the tank was supposed to blend into the surrounding landscape not visually, but in the infrared spectrum, becoming absolutely invisible to enemy thermal imaging sites. Thermal imagers are the primary means of detecting armored vehicles on a modern battlefield, especially in night conditions and low visibility. In the promotional clips shown at the exhibition in Kielce, this system looked stunning. Computer graphics clearly demonstrated how a tank, burning hot after a march, literally disappears from a thermal imager screen within seconds, turning into a blurry spot indistinguishable from a hill or a bush. Spectators gasped, journalists dashed off enthusiastic notes, and military attachés from foreign states made entries in their notebooks. If this technology had actually worked the way the developers promised, it would have overturned all existing principles of detecting and destroying armored targets. However, people professionally engaged in camouflaging military equipment treated the statements of the Poles with a fair amount of skepticism. It was not that the concept of thermal camouflage was something new. On the contrary, by 2013, several working solutions in this field already existed in the world. Some of them were significantly simpler and cheaper. Take, for instance, a Soviet development, a special paste named Tuman R. This composition, when applied to a soldier's skin or uniform, absorbed up to 95% of the infrared radiation of the human body, making the soldier practically invisible to enemy thermal imagers. Naturally, the paste was intended for infantry rather than armored vehicles. But the principle itself showed that in the Soviet Union, this problem began to be addressed long before the emergence of the Polish concept and through much more down-to-earth methods. Solutions existed for machinery as well. A British company developed a multi-spectral camouflage system that operated on a similar principle. Special coatings reduced the visibility of combat vehicles across several bands simultaneously, including infrared and radar. The Swedes went even further and created the Barracuda camouflage system, which was a set of light modular panels hung on equipment that radically reduced its thermal signature. Barracuda had already passed military trials, was in service with several armies, and had proven its effectiveness in real conditions rather than in beautiful computer animations. The fundamental difference between these existing systems and what the Poles were offering lay in the level of complexity. The British and Swedish solutions were passive. They merely reduced the thermal radiation of the equipment due to the properties of the materials. These are relatively simple, reliable, and inexpensive technologies that can be mass-produced and installed on any vehicle. The Polish concept, however, assumed an active system that had to continuously analyze the environment and dynamically alter the temperature of the tank's surface. Such a system required colossal computing power, a highly complex network of sensors, a vast amount of energy, and an entirely new type of thermal panels, which at that time did not exist in any country in the world. Another unpleasant question arose. How was this system supposed to handle the heat from a running engine and exhaust gases? A diesel motor with a capacity of nearly 1,000 horsepower generates a monstrous amount of heat. Masking it with thermal panels on the hull is physically impossible because hot exhaust will still escape outward, giving away the vehicle. Not a single promotional clip explained how the developers intended to solve this fundamental problem. However, uncomfortable technical details were carefully avoided during presentations, shifting the audience's attention to spectacular graphics and loud promises. It is worth mentioning separately the claims that the armor of the PL-01 was capable of absorbing radio waves, reducing the vehicle's visibility to enemy radars. This is another element of the stealth concept borrowed from aviation technologies. But while in aviation radar-absorbing coatings have been refined over decades and are applied to the relatively smooth surfaces of airplanes, applying the same logic to a tank covered with modular armor packages, external elements, and active protection presented a task of an entirely different order of complexity. In dry terms, the situation looked as follows. Each individual technology claimed for the PL-01 theoretically had a right to exist. But gathering them all together in a single vehicle weighing 35 tons, staying within a reasonable budget, and bringing it to serial production through the forces of a country that had never in its history created tanks from scratch was no longer an engineering task. It resembled a script for a science fiction novel. Now is the perfect time to reveal the main secret that the Polish defense sector carefully hid behind beautiful presentations and dramatic advertising clips. That very tank of the future, written about by the planet's largest military publications, admired by experts, and allegedly feared by potential adversaries, never existed. In fact, what stood on the exhibition grounds in Kielce and caused visitors to line up for photographs was a full-scale mock-up, a driving model at a scale of 1:1 with a functioning chassis. The list of functional elements ended entirely right there. The hull of this impressive vehicle contained no armored capsule for the crew, no life support systems, and no electronics whatsoever. The turret, which looked so menacing in photographs, did not rotate, and could not rotate because there was nothing inside it. No gun, no automatic loader, no sighting system, and no third-generation thermal imagers. The remotely controlled weapon station on the roof was a dummy. The panels of the active thermal camouflage, for which the whole world called this vehicle a ghost tank, did not exist even in the form of a laboratory specimen. The radar-absorbing armor made of ceramics and ornament, the modular armor packages, and the active protection along the lines of the Israeli Iron Fist remained exclusively on the pages of promotional brochures and in computer graphics files. Essentially, OBRUM built a giant toy on a real chassis. The diesel engine did work, the tracks did turn, and the vehicle could indeed move under its own power. This is exactly why the tank rolled out dramatically onto the grounds in presentation videos, creating a complete illusion of combat-ready equipment. But as soon as one dug slightly beneath the ceremonial facade, the illusion collapsed like a house of cards. This explained why no one at the exhibition was allowed to look inside the vehicle, why the turret stood motionless, and why not a single firing trial was conducted over all the years of the project's existence. When information about the real state of the project began to leak into the professional community, the reaction was predictably painful. Those same experts who just yesterday were praising the Polish tank on the pages of authoritative publications felt deceived. International military portals that had previously published enthusiastic reviews began releasing scathing materials, accusing OBRUM and its British partners of intentionally misleading the public. Critics pointed out that the company deliberately blurred the line between a concept and a prototype, allowing the press and the public to think they were looking at a nearly finished combat vehicle, whereas in reality, it was a decoration with a motor. The most painful blow fell upon the deadlines named by the developers. A prototype was supposed to appear by 2016. That date came and went without any results. There was no prototype, nor even separate working components, no turret, no gun assembly, no active protection system, and not a single square centimeter of that wonder armor. Serial production, promised by 2022, turned into a dark joke recalled with bitter irony on military forums. By that point, no one was seriously waiting for the appearance of the PL-01 in any form whatsoever. The reasons for the failure lay on the surface, and any sober-minded engineer could have predicted them back in 2013. Poland possessed neither a design school in the field of tank manufacturing, nor an industrial base for producing modern armored hulls, nor experience in developing automatic loaders, nor competencies in creating composite armor. All that the Polish defense industry possessed in the field of heavy armored vehicles was the licensed production and modernization of Soviet vehicles left to the country since the days of the Warsaw Pact. Designing a fundamentally new tank from scratch required decades of accumulated experience, gigantic investments in research and testing infrastructure, and thousands of highly qualified specialists, which Poland simply lacked. Financing became a separate problem. Developing a modern main combat tank from a clean sheet to a production model costs billions of dollars. It is enough to look at the budgets of the Abrams, Leopard, or Russian Armata programs to understand the scale of the necessary investments. The Polish military budget simply could not carry expenditures of that order, and no government of the country was ready to allocate such funds to a project whose realism raised more and more doubts with each passing year. After the dust from collapsed expectations settled, Poland found itself at the exact same point from which it had tried to break free with its loud concept. The country had not gained its own modern tank, and the need to refresh the armored fleet had gone nowhere. Here begins, perhaps, the most ironic chapter of this entire story. Instead of a breakthrough into the future, the Polish military was forced once again to turn to the heritage of the past and take up the modernization of those very T-72 tanks that the country's defense industry could not get rid of for decades. These vehicles came to Poland from the Warsaw Pact. The Soviet Union had generously supplied its allies with armored vehicles in its time, and the Poles received hundreds of T-72 tanks of various modifications. For its time, this tank was an excellent vehicle, compact, agile, with a powerful gun and good armor. In the 70s of the last century, it was considered one of the best main combat tanks on the planet. But by the second decade of the 21st century, this design was hopelessly obsolete, and no modernizations could turn a half-century-old vehicle into an equal to modern Leopards or Abrams. Nevertheless, the Poles stubbornly tried to squeeze the maximum possible out of the old platform. Program after program, contract after contract. The T-72 tanks received new sights, updated dynamic protection, modernized engines, and communication tools. Each such modification was presented as a significant increase in combat capability, but in fact, it resembled attempts to attach modern gadgets to the body of an old car. Externally, the vehicle looked slightly fresher. However, the fundamental limitations of the design, such as a cramped combat compartment, an obsolete layout with the crew in the turret, and insufficient protection for the sides and rear, remained unchanged. Here it is worth asking a question that surely arises for everyone who followed this story. Could the PL-01 have become a reality in principle if the stars had aligned differently? If money, technologies, and political will had been found? The answer to this question will forever remain in the realm of speculation, because it was never possible to test the claimed characteristics in practice. However, some indirect conclusions can be drawn. Poland, by that time, already had experience in creating modern armored vehicles. The Borsuk infantry fighting vehicle, developed by the same OBRUM company, demonstrated a completely decent level of engineering solutions and reached the stage of working prototypes. If a similar quality could have been transferred to a tank platform, the result might have turned out to be workable at the very least. But a tank is an entirely different level of complexity compared to an infantry fighting vehicle. The main stumbling block remained the declared mass of 35 tons. Providing protection against modern armor-piercing, fin-stabilized, discarding sabot shells and tandem high-explosive anti-tank munitions at such a weight is a task that not a single designer in the world has solved yet. Composite armor made of ceramics and ornament, at a thickness sufficient to withstand serious threats, would inevitably pull the vehicle's mass far beyond the declared parameters. An increase in weight would require a more powerful engine, a reinforced suspension, and stronger tracks, and the entire beautiful concept of a light, fast, stealth tank would collapse like dominoes. There was another non-obvious aspect to the project that is rarely mentioned. The appearance of the PL-01 on the world stage coincided with a period of active military expenditure growth in the countries of Eastern Europe. The demonstration of an ambitious concept could have been part of a broader strategy to attract the attention of Western partners, indicate technological ambitions, and gain access to joint weapons development programs. From this point of view, the project partly fulfilled its task. After all, cooperation with the British company BAE Systems was completely real, even though it did not lead to tangible results in the field of tank manufacturing. In the end, the Polish army took the path chosen by many countries unable to afford the development of their own tank from scratch, the path of purchasing finished foreign vehicles. Instead of a revolutionary domestic product, the Poles turned to solutions from other states that had been proven by time and battles. The story of the PL-01 ended not with an explosion and not with a triumph, but with a quiet fading away. The project simply stopped being mentioned in official documents, as if it had never existed. The mock-up that once struck the imagination of the entire world went to gather dust on the backlots of the exhibition complex, turning from a symbol of technological breakthrough into a monument to unfulfilled dreams and exaggerated expectations of an entire country.